All right. Well, welcome. Happy Thursday to you all. We're so glad you could join us this morning. Today, we are going to dive into standards. So grades K to 8 standards. We will be focusing in that area today. Heather Jenkins is your lead presenter today, and I'm Lauren Mercier. Mike Schwartz is also working with us with the 21st Century Learning Program, but he is not on the call today. He may jump on in a little bit, but he's not on to start. So you've seen us before. We're so happy to see you, and we're going to get started in just a minute. First, though, we do have just a few logistics to go over. Again, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you. As you now know, our session is being recorded, and we will make it available to you. So we will send this to you in a follow-up email in the next day or two. You definitely are encouraged to participate. We're happy to see your faces. We understand, though, if that's not your choice right now, you've got other things going on. We understand that, and you're definitely encouraged to ask questions. We'll have some times where we pause and ask if there's any questions, but honestly, if you have questions as they come up with the content, we would love for you to ask the questions at that point so it feels relevant as we're answering those questions. As I mentioned, you'll get the follow-up email with this recording and then any other supplements that we might have for you. And then finally, as always, your feedback is very important to us. We do read every single survey that comes back to us, every single comment, and we really do try to adjust our programming based on your feedback. So at the end of this meeting, we will pop the survey link in the chat, and we would love for you to fill that out for us.
All right. So as we get started, so here we go. Our target today is we're obviously going to be digging a little bit more into the standards, and we're also going to talk a little bit about depth of knowledge, and all of this is to improve student outcomes. The last meeting that we had was our New Hampshire SAS summative results for the last 3 years. And we looked a little bit at standards there. I'm going to review a little bit of that, give you a couple minutes to go into those particular standards again, and then I'm going to give you just a little bit more information and a little bit more depth of understanding for the standards and a little bit of time to work on taking a peek at them yourselves and asking any questions. So this is really just focused on that smaller section of the New Hampshire SAS training that we had a couple of weeks ago. So here's our agenda for today. We're looking at knowing your standards. I really want to get into a little bit of the depth of knowledge as well, because it's not just knowing the standards, but understanding where students need to be for depth of knowledge, and then transferring that learning into your programs, and then wrapping up with any question and answer. So just a review for what standards are. Right? They're expectations that inform or shape one's work, right? So if you're an architect, you're guided by your building codes, any sort of information that you need about student learning, this is what is the crux of everything that we're doing. So for the academic standards, right, they're those expectations for what we want students to learn, right? They are really guided by what our state and national standards are. For New Hampshire, we have implemented the Common Core. So I know that we have a couple of districts, like I said before, that have their own particular sets of standards, but from what I know, they're all based on the Common Core and might have a little bit of extras in there as well. So why we use them, right? They provide us with a framework, and they're really give us our learning priorities for students. They are the guide to help us design our curriculum and any sort of assessments that we're doing. I know you're not necessarily doing standard assessments in your programs, but you are assessing students, or hopefully you are assessing students to be able to see how effective your particular lessons or projects or anything are with your students. and they help us to ensure that all students have access to the same learning goals and expectations, right? Especially for your districts who have multiple schools associated, you want to make sure that everybody's getting those same opportunities and they have the same expectations. Again, for the most part, we are talking Common Core standards and understanding what the Common Core standards are for English language arts and for the mathematical practice. We talked about this. I just want to review here. What we have is for ELA, you have your domains, or what we call reporting categories for New Hampshire SAS. So those are your big sort of umbrellas of standards that we're looking at. And for math, the same thing, right? Our big areas within a particular grade level of what we're looking at. And then we like to talk a lot about clusters of standards, right? What are some of those subcategories of standards underneath the umbrella so that we can really hit home those clusters and then the individual standards within them. Same thing for math. We're looking at operations and algebraic thinking. You have a couple of clusters and then standards underneath there. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Common Core ELA standards, and they were built on, there's some shifts that are happening. So the regular practice with complex texts and their academic language, that's one of the shifts. We're looking at reading, writing, and speaking that's grounded in evidence from those texts, both literary and informational, and then building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. So those are your three real sort of categories of your ELA standards. And so when we're talking about reading anchor standards, specifically K-8, there's 10 of them. So underneath, we have our key ideas and details. We have craft and structure. We have integration of knowledge and ideas, and then range of reading and level of text complexity. So whether you're talking about reading informational text or reading literature, these are your reading anchor standards. The great thing about ELA is that they're the same standards K-8. Obviously, at each grade level, you sort of change a little bit and it becomes a little bit more complex at each grade level, but ELA is really consistent throughout the grade levels. When it comes to writing, it's the same thing. We have your writing anchor standards. So every grade level has text types and purposes, production and distribution of writing, research to build and present knowledge, and range of writing. So all of the grade levels have these particular standards. In the lower grades, it may say this standard starts in grade 3, but it's at least listed on the standards documents so that you can see the consistency throughout. So as we're looking at ELA standards, there's a vertical progression as well of ELA standards. So we have a particular standard, right? So we have the Common Core Reading 1 standard, and you can say read closely to determine the text. You can see up at the top what that is. And then you can see that's your anchor standard, but then your different grade levels are listed under each one. So you can see what that standard looks like in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way up through high school. So there are these vertical progressions that you're able to see for your ELA standards as well. It's really helpful specifically in your programs because you work with so many grade levels to know what that standard looked like at a particular grade level and how it progresses through. So when we're looking at math for K-8 math standards, they are internationally benchmarked, right? They're going to be able to provide you with that guidance and rigor for building knowledge, specifically conceptual knowledge and procedural skills for application of those skills. So with math, it's a little bit different in that depending on the grade level, your standards shift, right? So there's specific key concepts in each grade level. And where this becomes tricky is specifically when kids are perhaps not performing at their grade level, you need to sort of understand what their prerequisite skills are to be able to know what they need to be doing at that particular grade level. So it is a little bit harder sometimes to figure out what students' gaps are to be able to get them where they need to go with math. You have to look a little bit more closely that way. So there's some developmental progressions and learning trajectories I'm going to share with you. And there are, the way that math works is that the key concepts within math, they go over 3 different years. They tend to be in like 3-year cycles. So maybe 1 year, a concept is introduced, but it's not necessarily mastered that year. So maybe in 2nd grade, you have a skill that's introduced. In 3rd grade, they might really be focused on working on that. And then that skill is actually mastered in 4th grade. That's the way most mathematical concepts work, is in these 3-year cycles. So here are the math concepts for each grade level. So in grades K to 2, you're looking at concept skills and problem solving related to addition and subtraction. In grades 3 through 5, again, concepts and skills and problem solving related to multiplication and division of whole numbers and fractions. Grade 6 is ratios and proportional relationships and early algebraic expressions and equations. Grade 7, you can see it's ratios and proportional relationships and arithmetic of rational numbers. And in grade 8, it's linear algebra and linear functions. A lot of this is really looking at the algebra progression, right? So we know as kids, if you have anybody that you're working with 8th grade, or any 8th grade teachers in particular, the end game is algebra. Once they start high school, they need to have those skills related to algebra. Not that geometry is not as important, but it's really sort of the crux of all of mathematical stuff is going into algebra. So that's what these particular concepts are really feeding into. And so what I want to do right now is just give you just a couple of minutes to review those standards. I know that we've given you access to these particular documents, but I want to just have you, what's going to happen is Lauren is going to pop the link to the standards folder for this particular meeting. And I just want you to be able to make sure that you can open it and then take a peek at anything in there. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just ask questions on that and possibly take just a little bit of a breather to be able to figure out if you have any questions specifically about the standards there. Put that link right in the chat. And then if you have questions, just unmute. What I did for the, what I did for the standards, just so that you can understand, I think I explained this during the last one. I cut the standards up so that you could see the ELA standards K to 2, then 3 to 5, 6 to 8. I also put the 9 through 12 in here for anybody who has the 9 through 12. And then this is the full ELA document. And then I cut the full math in 100 and something page document. And so you've got the 0 here is kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it's the full Common Core that's broken up for each grade level. So you can see what it is for each grade level. Okay, all right. So I'll have you come back to the presentation here. If you have any questions, like I said, just unmute. I'm going to go on to the next sort of area that we're going to be talking about, which is specifically about math and a website that's called Achieve the Core. So with Achieve the Core, what they have done is folks that are really well versed in the Common Core, teachers specifically, have created these progression documents for each grade level, K to 8, that tells you what the major work is in that particular grade level and what your major standards, clusters of standards are, your supporting clusters, and your additional clusters. These particular documents I find invaluable because they're telling us at this particular grade level, this is what you really want to concentrate on. So as you're thinking about programming, you're thinking about math, it's really helpful to look at what particular standards and clusters of standards are sort of, I guess, not worth more than others, but really essential for a particular grade level. So the way these documents work is, again, each grade level has this document. These green areas here are corresponding with a cluster of standards that are within the Common Core. So when we look at this first grade, Operations and Algebraic Thinking A, that is our first cluster of standards under Operations and Algebraic Thinking. The Operations and Algebraic Thinking B, that is the second cluster of standards. So you'll see this wording on your standards documents as well, so that you can see all of the different standards that are underneath that. The reason I really like these is because a lot of times when we're, looking at any sort of programming or looking at what we want to focus on, we would just want to make sure that we aren't taking a ton of time looking at standards and focusing on standards that are not necessarily something that's super important for a particular grade level. I also like the fact that these documents highlight the major work in all the grade levels K to 8, so you can see what each particular grade level looks at and needs to have for their particular grade level and a fluency for your grade level that you're looking at. On the second page of every single one of these documents is that progression to algebra. Again, that being sort of the end game for the start of a high school. So the second page of each one of these shows every grade level and what's important at that particular grade level as they move through. So this also helps you kind of take a look at, if you're looking maybe at third grade, what second graders needed to be able to know before third grade. So these particular documents, I put in a folder as well for you to be able to take a peek at. Lauren is going to pop that into the chat, but I'm going to just show you what this is. So this particular document is the focus document for grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is kindergarten. We also have some things for high school that are looking at what is really important for your high school and the prerequisites that are available for that. This particular document is everything combined. So each one of these will be a 2-page PDF. So I just want to give you a couple of minutes to look at those and ask any questions that you might have with those particular documents. Lauren just put that right in the chat, so you can get right to the drive there. Okay, so I'll have you come back here. If you have any questions, like I said, definitely let us know. They achieve the core documents you'll have access to. Just so you know as well, this particular PowerPoint or Google Slides, once you get this, you'll have access. There's a link right here on this yellow folder. So if you do end up wanting to share this with any of your folks that are on your sites, any of the instructors that you have there, or folks that work with students, and you want to be able to share this, all the links are right in there, and it will be open to whoever has the PowerPoint document. So when you get that email, you can forward this particular PowerPoint to anybody. Moving on again to looking at different ways to look at the standards and really being able to dig into them. The New Hampshire SAS portal has some what are called performance level descriptors, or PLDs. So I want to show you a little bit about and talk a little bit about how those might be able to help you with your programming. The PLDs, they're located in the resources area of the Cambium portal. You do not need a login. I know that some of you are working on being able to get a login and you didn't necessarily have access to the data. The resources are available even without a login. It doesn't require it. So I've got the link that's right down on the bottom of this so that you can see with the PLDs, but I've also put them in a folder so you don't have to worry too much about it. So the PLDs, they're rubrics, and they align with all of those Common Core standards. They also align with the next generation science standards. I did put the science ones in there just in case you wanted to take a peek at them. But the rubrics outline each level of proficiency for a specific standard. So for the New Hampshire SAS, there's 4 levels of proficiency. So each one of the PLD documents has what students would do at a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. I find them really helpful to be able to help you break apart that standard and really understand what students should be doing with that particular standard. So there's ELA, there's math, and there's science. This is a little bit about what one looks like. This is the 3rd grade one. So you can see here, you have a particular standard. This is reading literature for 3rd grade, that first standard. And what a student would do that's below proficient, this is what they would be doing. Here's somebody who's approaching proficiency. Here's somebody who is proficient. So we want kids to be at least here, if not here. So proficient or highly proficient. I just really find that it's enlightening to see what we want students to be doing that to be able to reach proficiency. So it's just another way to look at your standards. This is the ELA one. And here's the same thing for math. It's basically saying, this is the particular standard. This is a 3rd grade standard, operations and algebraic thinking. This is that first standard underneath there. And this is what students are doing at each level of proficiency for that standard. So this is our last little time for you to take a peek. I'm going to have Lauren, she just popped that link in. This is what the folder looks like. And so we've got some ELA performance level descriptors for each grade level, some math ones, and then your science ones are here. So I'll just give you just a few minutes to take a peek at those and ask any questions as you're taking a look at those and see how you might find those helpful. Okay. All right, so just to take a peek, to kind of wrap up some of the stuff that we've been talking about here, this is all the different places that you can find information about standards. So we've got the Common Core Standards website. We've got the Achieve the Core. There's also the math progressions documents that's still on similar to that Achieve the Core. And then we also have the another math standards document that we have here that's similar, and the PLDs. So these are all of the information, the websites that you can get specifically related to standards. I have a little star here at the bottom. So when we are looking at digging into standards, we always want to make sure that we are looking at the grade levels before and the grade levels after, so that we know where students are coming from and where they're going to. You all have sort of, you know that you have to do that because you're working with multiple grade levels anyway, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Any questions on standards before I start moving on to depth of knowledge? All right. When we're talking about depth of knowledge, I just want to give you a quick overview about depth of knowledge. And so we talk about depth of knowledge and you hear like DOK 1, DOK 2, 3, and 4. It's not necessarily just about things getting more difficult or harder. It's really mostly about the cognitive rigor that's associated with a particular depth of knowledge. So some of the things that we're hoping that students are able to do is have that flexible thinking, seeing multiple possibilities or approaches or perspectives for how things are going to be solved, and then really looking at understanding the concepts deeply and being able to apply them across multiple scenarios. So a lot of times what we think of when we think that kids maybe need to, they already have a skill, so we just give them more of that skill. That's sort of gone by the wayside. We're really looking at what is the depth of knowledge that we're asking students to have to be able to do these particular things. A lot of this information comes from Hess and the research that's been done and really looked at for depth of knowledge. We'll talk about that in relation to Bloom's taxonomy, which is something that folks have really been looking at for quite a while as well. So as we start to learn tasks as a beginner, we need to understand all the different things that we're doing to be able to complete those tasks, right? When we practice those routines, right, they become more automatic, but it's not like the depth of knowledge is changing. You're asking students to do a pretty basic skill. You're having them do it a lot. They just start to get a little bit more automatic with it. For a more complex tasks, so something that's more of a DOK 3 or 4, we need those students to apply what they learned for depth of knowledge 1 and 2 skills to be a little bit less of a memorization and a more complex task. So we always look at sports examples, right? We're looking at any sort of sport that you do. You need to practice certain skills to be able to do better, right? You're learning basketball, you're learning soccer. You need to be able to pass and you need to be able to dribble, or you need to be able to move the ball to be able to then get it down the field to score the goal. So that's really what we're looking at when we're thinking of depth of knowledge and being able to truly understand what all of those skills are to be able to meet an end goal. So unlike Bloom's taxonomy, this is not a hierarchy. This is not, well, depth of knowledge 3 and 4 is so much better than depth of knowledge 1 and 2, because you can't actually do depth of knowledge 3 and 4 without understanding skills at depth of knowledge 1 and 2. But what we want to make sure of is that we're doing those depth of knowledge 1 and 2s and moving on from that to the depth of knowledge 3 and 4, and having students really start using that reasoning and analyzing concepts in a little bit deeper way, right? So we're scaffolding that learning, right, from that basic learning of depth of knowledge 1 and 2 into that deeper understanding, right? So here's the other thing. With depth of knowledge, what a lot of folks do and think of is that, well, if there's multiple steps, then it's got to be a higher depth of knowledge, right? And that's not necessarily the case, right? We're really talking about cognitive rigor, what it is that a student needs to be able to do and what we're asking of them, and having that be less surface level, because you can do 10 steps and it's the exact same surface level. We want kids getting into how we can make those particular activities that we're having them do a little bit more complex, and have them be able to apply learning to be able to complete them. So here's an example. These are levels 1 through 4. These are just question stems with an ELA focus. So you can see here, the depth of knowledge 1 are simple skills. We're looking at reciting the facts. Here's what's in my particular reading that I'm doing. We're not really requiring them to analyze anything. It's just a basic understanding. Here's what happened, and being able to just recite what's happened in there. So the depth of knowledge 2, as we get a little bit more into that mental processing, we're asking them to do something than just recall what was in the text, right? So they need to understand and comprehend, and now they're processing things a little bit differently. So we're asking them to summarize or to organize or sort of interpret what is in a particular text. So these are what we're requiring students to do. And these are the key concepts that we're asking them to do traditionally with a depth of knowledge 2 type of question or activity. Depth of knowledge 3, we're asking them to do stuff beyond the text, right? We're asking them to generalize or explain or connect ideas to something maybe that they've seen in another text or that they know themselves, right? It's a little bit more abstract. We're asking them to maybe look at character traits and describe the characters, or what you feel like the character might do, or why a character responded a certain way in a particular text. Or maybe looking at what the author's purpose might be, which is not stated in the text. We just have to interpret what they feel like the author was trying to send as a message. As we're going beyond the text and going to DOK 4, we're looking at higher order thinking, right? Extending the activity, taking information from one source and then applying it to something else. So we're looking at different perspectives. We're looking at common themes within different texts and different maybe research areas, and really analyzing that information. So this is where we're talking about, we want students to be in a depth of knowledge 3 and maybe a 4, but they need to be able to do these things before they do the depth of knowledge 3 or 4. So again, we just want to make sure that we're not just staying down here. This is just a quick little guide for as you are looking at students, and if they're reading or doing any sort of comprehension things in your programs, these are just some general, these are for both, actually, for both math and ELA. These are some question stems that you can have, and just, these are level 1s. These are sort of those, verbs that we're looking at that students are doing. Here's the level 2 concepts and skills. Here's the level 3 and the level 4. So this just might help you in thinking when you're helping folks figure out what the content is going to be, what we're asking students to do, and how it directly correlates to a depth of knowledge we're asking students to have for something. For math, it's a little bit different. We have, for each particular level of math, and we have a standard here, we can talk about how the standards sort of are moving up through the grades and what they're being asked to do with a particular standard for math. I did not put all of the depth of knowledge matrices in here for math. This is specifically Robert Kaplinski's depth of knowledge matrices. There is a link here. So if you click on this link, this is where you're getting, this is particularly the elementary math and the depth of knowledge here. And then as we get on to the next one here, we're also continuing to look at elementary. So you've got your link here to that particular document. And then we also can move on. This is all of the middle school, and you can see it will bring you to a page that's got all of the middle school depth of knowledge matrices along with those third grade ones. So here's all of the matrices so that you can just see for math how, when you're asking students to do certain skills, what it would look like in a depth of knowledge 1, 2, or 3. So I just want to talk a little bit about this. Again, I'm just kind of reiterating what I've said before. We're looking really at cognitive rigor, right? We're not necessarily looking at, for your depth of knowledge that, again, level 1 is not, less than a level 3. They need to have all of those depth of knowledge sort of experiences to be able to really start being able to use a little bit more cognitive rigor and a little bit more of their understanding to apply those skills. For Hess has a whole bunch of information. She has done a lot with looking at cognitive rigor matrices as well. So this is, I'm just going to thank Annie Wallace from the Department of Education. She has a lot of information about Karen Hess and has put a lot of this together. If you click on any of these, what happens is it opens up this sort of cognitive rigor matrice. And this is specifically what we're asking with Bloom's taxonomy and what that means for the DOK levels. So she's sort of combined Bloom's taxonomy and really looked at what it means for students to be doing something at a depth of knowledge 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if you're really into this and would like to take a peek at these, we have all of these little toolkits here that are linked. And then this is her site in general that might help you when you're looking at what could we be having students do that might be a really meaningful activity for them to do, and where that sort of falls within the depth of knowledge hierarchy there, or not hierarchy, but depth of knowledge levels. So to understand a little bit more about depth of knowledge, I'm not going to get into it today here. All of these particular sites have different information on them that will help you understand the standards in a little bit different way. So Khan Academy, everybody knows about Khan Academy. They have great videos there that can tell you, they're great teaching tools. Illustrative Math has some practice standards and some content standard activities. Open Middle is the same thing, but it's for math. SBAC is what New Hampshire SAS used to be. They have sample items. If you have staff that are really looking at, we need to really focus on a particular standard, and they're looking for different ways or different questions that they might be able to ask students, I know that you're not trying to do, like your traditional academic skills. You're not necessarily going to give students a math problem to solve. You're probably trying to look a little bit more cross-curricular, but I really find that looking at sample questions helps us understand the standards. Engage New York is open resource for math. These Common Lit, NewsELA, and the Lexile Quantile Hub have just different activities that you might be able to do. Common Lit and NewsELA have a lot of ELA related things. So if you need passages or anything like that, if you're doing any of that sort of stuff in your after school programs, the Lexile Quantile Hub is great too. I like it a lot for the quantile or math because it tells you what the prerequisite skills are and how you might be able to teach those. So there's a lot of information on there. It is sponsored by the DOE. So if you put it in there and you put your email address in there, if you're a New Hampshire educator of any kind, it's free. So you can take a look at that. And then these are just some little formative assessment areas where you might be able to do some quick assessments if that's what you do or would like to do within your after school program. So the last thing I want to talk about is transferring learning, right? I know that these after school programs are not like a traditional classroom, but I do want to stress that students need to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it still. So I would be remiss if I did not mention John Hattie. He is the pioneer of having students have skin in the game when it comes to learning and having teachers really dial in and focus on what truly needs to be understood by students and then transferring that to students. So this particular quote is his. It's when teaching and learning are visible, there are greater likelihood that students reaching higher levels of achievement. Kids need to know what they're doing and why. And I know we're trying to make sure that it's fun and engaging. That is also in a particular classroom, we try to do that. But here's what we know, right? So the biggest effect on student learning is what he calls visible learning, being very clear about what we want the students to learn and really having them understand what they need to know. What do I need to know and what is my job in this, right? And emphasizing this all day long, not just listing it on a board, but really having students understand what their success criteria is for a particular activity is essential. These are just examples of a learning target. So we have, the grade 1 key ideas and details, right? So we have these particular standards. Here's some I can statements that go along with those particular standards. And so that students are knowing this is what I need to be able to do to show that I have understanding of these particular concepts. So there's an ELA example. And then really taking a look at that. So you have the I can statements, but this is taking it even further. I know I am successful when I can do these particular things. So this is really setting them up for, okay, so now I know I've mastered this when I'm able to do these particular things. So this is another just example of how you can really take a look at this when it comes to math. So here's a second grade math. These are the particular standards that we're looking at, and these are the I can statements, right? And then this is, I know I am successful when I can do this. So really, I know in the after school programs, it's probably a little bit different, but just make sure that students really understand what their particular understanding needs to be, because they'll be far more successful that way. I also, in a folder, put in all of the math information for student checklists or model competencies have been finished. They're on the DOE website. I'm just going to open that up so you can see where I'm talking about. So here are the high school competencies. These are all the math. They have ELA. Those are being updated. But what the competencies do is they help you understand maybe how to group certain standards and then create a sort of checklist to say the students have all of these particular skills. Now we're going to do this particular activity where they're going to be able to show us that they know those skills. So a lot of times you might have performance tasks or project-based learning in your after-school programs. These particular competencies help you understand what you might be able to group for standards, the skills that might need to be sort of isolated a little bit, and then what you might be able to do for a performance task for that. So those are all there. They're also in the handouts that are in this particular area here. I put the model competencies right in here so that you can see them. I'll throw this really quickly into the chat. So that you can kind of see what those are. They might just help you, like I said, in creating some of that project-based learning that you might want to be doing. So this is really, we're talking about student ownership too, right? So we're looking at what we need to do and how we can evaluate what students are learning and make sure that they are really understanding what they need to be doing and have that buy-in as well. And so that is basically the end here. So I do want to take a little bit of time. I know we are right up and we have like 3 minutes. So I do want to make sure that I answer any questions, or if you have any other thoughts, you can definitely unmute. Just to show you a little bit of what's coming up next, we do on May 11th have some general office hours. So as you start getting into some other things, we're going to be available for you from 11:30 to 12:30 on May 11th. Also, we had been giving you a little bit of information about when the youth surveys and all the other surveys are coming out. All the drafts are complete for that. I know that I believe at least for the youth surveys, if that's the one that might need to go to school boards, that might have already been shared with you by Kathy and Emily, and possibly even some of these others. We are working on the technical side of things to get those particular surveys updated in ESS and in KN, so that they will be available for you to be able to do electronically as well. So that's that. Again, we really do want your feedback. I have right now, Lauren, put the link to the Survey Monkey for you to be able to fill out and to let us know if there's anything else you might need, or if there's a way that we could tweak this particular training so that in the future we're making sure we're meeting your needs. And here's our information. You can reach out to any of us at any time if you have questions. We can always set up a quick Zoom if you need anything. That's the Survey Monkey there again. And that's our training today. So please let us know if you have any questions before you get off.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great day.
I have one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I do.
Of course. We love your questions.
Just because I know that this was a lot of information, especially for some of us that are not teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Will we have a I think that it would be really helpful to have a training, and this would be really helpful for my site coordinators as well, to have a training that really shows us exactly how it's done. Like as an example, taking one of the standards and then showing us a really engaging, high quality activity that would tie to those standards.
We had on our list of trainings that we were going to try to do some cross-curricular trainings to say, okay, so if we're looking at a particular grade level, this is how you might take the standards and you might actually apply them and create activities that go along with them. That is not scheduled yet at this point, but it is on our radar to be able to show you sort of how that is done. And we're just trying to, well, we'll work with Emily and Kathy to figure out the best timing to be able to do that. But this was sort of the groundwork for being able to have that particular conversation as well. So yes, we will definitely be talking about doing that in the future. And we were trying to figure out if it was going to be multiple, sort of trainings, because we didn't know if it should be like, should we do K to 2? Should we go 3 to 5, then 6 to 8? And the process is pretty similar for how you do it, but obviously the standards are different at each grade level. And so maybe what I'm hearing from you is that it might be best to do like a K to 2. And then really dive into, okay, this is what you could do for something cross-curricular K to 2. Okay, here's something for 3 to 5 and what you might be able to do cross-curricular for 3 to 5. So we'll think about that and timing. And we will definitely be providing some assistance with that coming up.
Awesome. I think that would be so helpful. I just had my site visit evaluation, and now that we're looking at these GEPRA measures and looking at the standards, of course, like one of the things that makes our program very special for kids is that there's just a wide variety of things offered. Mm-hmm. We run 120 clubs a year, so at each site. So when we're looking at that, obviously we still need to get physical activity. We can't, really have, I think when people read these, they're like, oh, we're going to have a math club. But there's so many different ways to really integrate the standards in a fun way for kids. And I feel like that's our job in after school and putting in all of the social skills. And I think that would be great. Maybe Kathy, we could have a live training for something like that. And people would really be able to work as teams and develop a lesson plan based on the standards. Something like that would be really helpful, I think.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Well, definitely give us any other thoughts or feedback as well. And we'll do our best to make sure that whatever trainings you are feeling like you need, that we'll be able to try and help provide.